Devin asks, I was just curious if you read the book Outlive by Peter Attia. A lot of this stuff he writes about seems to coincide with a lot of stuff you talk about on the podcast. There's a good reason some of it does. So he quotes Michael Easter in the book. So Peter Attia quotes Michael Easter. Michael Easter has written a number of books. He's a great writer. Used to be my editor at Men's Health. And he's visited my house many times. I know he's been at least 2 of my workshops or more when I've talked about things like loaded carries and some of the other stuff that you see in this book. So essentially, even though I'm not quoted in this book, maybe I am. So the parts that sound like me in the book, it makes sense because it should. Michael has quoted me in the past quite a bit, and I appreciate that, Michael. Thank you very much. So I just want to get your thoughts. And then this last question, did you ever consider the use of a continuous glucose monitor? Okay, my favorite parts of the book is the last chapter on his emotional health. I thought that was really good. One of the overriding things you find out when you read the book, if you're exercising, if you're exercising, don't buy this book. If you're not exercising, buy this book, because this book will tell you to go exercise. I just saved you $22 in the United States and $42 to our friends up north in Canada. It's interesting because his co-author is Bill Gifford, and I think a better longevity book is Bill's book called Spring Chicken. And I've recommended Spring Chicken on this podcast dozens of times. Heck, I probably quote Spring Chicken as much as I quote Dick Nottmeyer, Tommy Kono, and some of the others. So thank you. Spring Chicken is really good. Your specific question was interesting about the glucose monitor because one of my athletes I worked with in the late 80s had what we used to call childhood diabetes, but now it's called type 1, I think. And so he sat me down with all of his nutritional information from his doctor and the American Diabetes Association. And he went through all of this stuff. So this is the late 1980s when I was young and good looking. What's fascinating is these chapters in Outlive that talks about the value, the lessons of continuous glucose monitoring is information every single one of our listeners from the podcast probably already knows without having to walk around with a huge piece of plastic on the back of their tricep. Not all carbs are created equal. In this day and age, I guess there's still people who don't know that. But yeah, I mean, if you're eating potato chips, 2 bags of potato chips, you're going to be hungry in half an hour. If you eat the same amount of calories in hard-boiled eggs, you won't be hungry in half an hour. Or liver, you won't be hungry. Or butter, you won't be hungry. So all carbs are not created equal. Butter is probably a bad example there, but you get the point. Number 2, rice and oatmeal are surprisingly glycemic. The glycemic index, one of the first books I ever read on life extension by Dirk Pearson, maybe, he talked about the glycemic index, and yeah, oatmeal is high, but how do you make oatmeal less high on the glycemic index? First, buy more original like steel cut, or just make the rawest form of oatmeal. Do what I do, add protein to it. Do what I do, add seeds to it. Do what most people do, add cinnamon. Now, it's probably not enough cinnamon to really blunt your glucose rise, but it still works and it tastes good. I remember when bodybuilders would tell me all they eat was chicken, broccoli, and chicken breast. Chicken, broccoli, and white rice. I used to always think, how are you guys controlling your blood sugar? But this is 1980s I-raising stuff. There's nothing new about that. Number 3, he talks about fructose, but we're not going to worry about that. 4, timing, duration, and intensity of exercise are really important. He mentions that your glucose can rise after weightlifting, but aerobic exercise kind of takes care of that. If you read Easy Strength for Fat Loss, what do you read? You lift weights and then you go for a walk. You lift weights and you go for a swim. You lift weights and you go for a heavy hands, a ruck, a run, whatever. Yeah, we know that. I've always used the concept of Pac-Man, Rusty Moore talks about the free fatty acids are freed up. I'm fine with that. Attia talks about the glucose being freed up. I'm fine with that. Lifting frees them up. And then like little Pac-Man, which also gets us back to the 80s, they get eaten up during your aerobic. And by the way, your aerobic doesn't have to be very high. I use Phil Maffetone's numbers a lot, and that works just great. The next point here, a good night's sleep is better for your blood profiles when it comes to glucose. Yeah. One of the first things I try to get people to do on a fat loss experiment or experience is teach them the value of meditation and sleep, because while you're asleep, well, like I always joke, we know you don't eat while you're asleep. And also too, it sets your body up to be a much better eater of glucose and free fatty acids. Stress, cortisol, and all the rest, big impact. Right, we know that. We just said that. Non-starchy vegetables have no impact. I put spinach in everything. I'm a big fan of spinach. I like, by the way, surprisingly, kale, especially if you can use some citric, like orange, lemon, whatever, with it. It's amazing. He mentions broccoli too. Shove all you want down your mouth. Again, nothing new. Foods high in protein are a mixed bag. He noticed that if it's high in protein and fat, it seems to be better. And that's why many bodybuilders through the years have lucked into figuring out that eggs are a wonderful bodybuilding device for leaning out. Just pure chicken breast, as he says, isn't as effective at keeping your glucose under control. The most important thing he says, and this is on that page 330 in the book, is stacking all these ideas. So let's stack them for you. And I'll call this book Easy Strength for Fat Loss. Sleep, wake up and meditate, fast, lift weights, go for a walk, eat veggies and protein, and drink a lot of water. The final point is the point I liked the most. He said that simply tracking things seemed to make him more aware of things. And I think that's why those continuous glucose things are so good. If you're not like, this is my journal. I spend a lot of time in my journal. You can see all the little side notes and all the nonsense in there. One of the things that really helps when you have a journal of any kind is that you're monitoring some things, and that by itself might be the key. So yeah, did I like the book? Okay, Ebert.com just reviewed the new My Big Fat Greek Wedding movie, the third edition. And it was a very, very complimentary review. And I liked it because of that. It was like this, and there should have been more sequels. These people, it's just fun. The cinematography is fantastic. And then I gave him a 1.5 out of 4 stars. And that's how I feel about this book. I really like the book, but I don't know if I can recommend it. Some of the science, some of the reading is dense and hard and not fun. And when you get done with the book, I'm going to tell you what to do. It's going to tell you to sleep, eat protein and vegetables, exercise, try fasting, go for a long walk. There's nothing new there. There are some nice things. And again, the chapter on his emotional health is a fabulous read. So do I recommend the book? Well, I'm going to give it 1.5 out of 4 stars, even though I think it's a good book and I liked it a lot. It's not a mixed review. Not everything I read is great for everybody. I've got some discus throwing books back there that I think are marvelous and it bore the pants off most of my readership. So thank you. All right, we'll move on.